I described a similar blend to a friend who doesn't smoke a pipe as chocolate smeared on a car tire. And I drove 5 hours across Virginia to get a tin of this. Bob's Chocolate Flake won the poll. I wasn't really surprised. This is a blend that sells out almost all the time. It's never online, or at least I can never find it online. So I actually drove across multiple states to find this. I'd driven through a lot of the states near me, and then it took a road trip across Virginia to find it. And I got it at a tobacconist in Roanoke, Virginia, out towards Appalachia. And then I recently saw it was available. So I'm assuming this might be one of the reasons this won the poll, but I had never smoked it before making this video, so this is a fresh tin. Two things I want to get into while I smoke this, and I can only answer one of them. While I was researching the Gawith blends, I went looking for information about the tobaccos used, the Brazilian, the Malawi, and the Zimbabwe, and on forums I found people saying African tobacco is lower quality. That almost rubbed me the wrong way, but I wanted to find out the basis for what they're saying. And the second one I genuinely can't answer, so I'll come back to it at the end. This might be similar to Two Friends English Chocolate. People seem to either speak really positively or really negatively about this one, mainly because it's a Lakeland, but I love Lakelands and I also love chocolate Englishes, so I was really curious. The Vaping Piper made a comparison video putting this against Two Friends English Chocolate, and that piqued my interest having had the Two Friends. So what I'm expecting is something like Two Friends English Chocolate, but with a Lakeland touch. I think the floral and the chocolate would go really well together with the Latakia. So is Bob a person? If you look it up online, Bob is not a person. Gawith doesn't know where this Bob came from. And during my research for the Lakelands, I had pretty much scoured every corner of the Gawith Hoggarth website, and it turns out they don't know who Bob is. They have some ideas about who Bob might be, but they don't have a specific person whose flake this is. I don't know how you open this. It says Virginia, Latakia, and Burley tobaccos with hints of cocoa and vanilla, and we'll get into the specific amounts, but here's the beautiful Gawith Hoggarth card. Notice I demolished the tin trying to get it open. Child lock. I'm not sure it's like a dessert because it smells like a chocolate pudding that went bad in a really weird way. And maybe there's a hint of smooth fruitiness that could be associated with the vanilla topping, but I can't discern the cocoa from the chocolate just yet. The moisture I think is almost perfect, it's just slightly moist. And the cut is nice and thin, which I like. And whether or not it looks topped, it doesn't really matter. It's called Chocolate Flake. I mean, it's definitely dark and you can tell that it's topped because there's no Cavendish in this. It rubs out quite easily. It's a really thin ribbon. My fingers smell like chocolate after. There's not much Latakia yet. It's 8%, and that's not a little bit in my opinion, although I guess it might be. We'll see. And yes, I know this will ghost a pipe. I'm using a pipe I don't use very often. It's my Peterson Killarney Zulu. Yes, it's an estate, and yes, this is not a factory stem, but I enjoy the wood grain on it. It's some bird's eye. It doesn't have rim char yet, but it will by the end of this video. Someone mentioned in the Ellipsis Flake video, I said I smoke estate pipes because I have no money, and then I lit the pipe with an IM Corona. I'm still recovering from the call out. On the Char light, you're definitely getting chocolate. It's sweet and the Latakia isn't there yet. And on the True light, the vanilla I think is used to smooth over some of the chocolate and some of the Latakia. And the Latakia is present here. You can definitely taste it. It gives a little bit of the mustiness. In comparison to Two Friends English Chocolate, I'd say this is a bit milder, like more chocolate and less emphasis on the fact that it's in English. I'd describe this as a chocolate aromatic with Latakia rather than an English blend topped with chocolate. I know, it's weird. I'm pretty sure this is the same Virginia and the same sun-cured and Burley that you'd find in the Ennerdale, but the Latakia here is different. I mean, that's a huge difference as well as the chocolate. And knowing it's likely the same leaf except for the Latakia, I don't expect it to be the same Lakeland. It's a really mild Lakeland compared to Ennerdale. This is very mildly a Lakeland. I'm thinking a smoky dark chocolate, honestly. I don't think it's a lot of Latakia, but I've also smoked pure Latakia. Nightcap is reportedly about 50%, so 8 feels almost negligible. It's just enough to be noticed. And I say reportedly because nobody published that number. It's what the community says, not what the manufacturer said. I'd say this is probably the English aromatic. I mean, Two Friends is good, and I'd say it's more Latakia forward than this, but this is a beautiful blend. I say this all the time, but it's really well done, and the mixture of tobaccos with the chocolate and the very light Lakeland. So I found this paper while doing research for this. When you're grading tobacco, yes, there are grades they give, whether it's a cutter, the color of leaf, how uniform it is, first choice, and so on. But it can't be that all African tobacco is worse. I feel like that's unrealistic. I also noticed that often it'll say specific tobacco from a specific African country like Malawi is added for sweetness. And it makes sense for Gawith Hoggarth to use African tobaccos. I mean, tobacco is grown in the UK, but I don't think they can sustain the amount they're selling. So I wanted to compare American grown tobaccos to African ones. It was relatively difficult to find. And mind you, a lot of research that exists currently is done specifically for cigarettes, so take it with a grain of salt. Okay, sugar. You'll often see people adding Malawi or Zimbabwe, Virginia for sweetness. And what I find is that Zimbabwe has 19.35% total sugar, while the US has 12.33. So the idea of using African tobacco for sugar makes sense. Objectively speaking, this paper finds there's more sugar in African tobacco. Okay, alkaloids. In terms of alkaloids, which nicotine would fall under? Brazil has the highest content of 3.98. Whether or not I feel that, I'd don't think I'm a good judge, but keep in mind Brazilian tobacco tends to have the highest alkaloids. Polyphenols. A phenol is a six-sided chemical structure with double bonds. You find it in tannins, the tannins in tea, the things that give it color. A polyphenol is something associated with having that chemical structure, or multiple phenols. So they also absorb light, and dyes often exhibit these double bonded carbon structures because when you absorb light, it will reflect another. So polyphenols are associated with sunlight and drought. In regions with more sunlight, the polyphenols are higher, specifically to protect the plant against the sun. So alkaloids like nicotine are protecting the plant against insects, and we make use of that. The plant adapts and produces more nicotine. And with polyphenols, tannins, other things that add flavor and complexity in regions with more sunlight, the plant adapts and creates these to absorb or reflect more of it. It's associated with like UV stress and drought. So in a sense, this stress makes flavor. I mean, we're smoking nicotine because it evolved to kill bugs. We like the chemical it evolved to produce to kill insects. So these values are NIR predicted, so it's not a chemical measurement where they dissolve the leaf matter into solution, but that doesn't really bother me because they prime the NIR prediction based off the chemical solvent produced. And on this paper, every author works for a state tobacco company in China, and the editor and reviewer work at Altria. So I'm keeping in mind that the only groups that will fund this research are typically cigarette firms. I don't expect pipe tobacco funding for quite some time, but I'm not worried about it. They have their methods and they have their math, and the paper is linked below. The study measures chemistry, but it doesn't really measure grade. What you're going to see is the chemical composition differences within these leaves. They have the list of how many samples from each country and region. And this is mostly applicable to cigarettes, but I think it's important for pipe smokers because yes, some tobacco is going to be used for pipes, but most of it's going to be used for cigarettes. So the practices that carry over from cigarettes are what we get to deal with in pipes, and the research that goes into tobacco is the same research we get to benefit from for pipes. So like, is it cheap and low quality, or is that the same thing? I don't know. I don't think it's the same thing, but I don't think it's worse quality. I think there's something valuable in appreciating tobaccos that come from Africa. Like in terms of coffee, if you look at coffee, Ethiopian coffee is considered some of the best. Nobody says, oh, they get it from Ethiopia, so it's worse. It's expected for it to be from there. I think us as Americans, we're kind of used to having tobacco come from our backyard. It's called Virginia for a reason, or Kentucky. But if tobacco is being grown in Africa for specific reasons, that doesn't make it worse quality. Even if it's cheaper there, even if labor is cheaper, even if smallholder farms can produce it cheaper. Most tobacco in Malawi is grown in smallholder farms, family farms, where the family produces 80% of the work. And I should say where that figure comes from because the paper it's in isn't making my point. It's a 2016 study of 685 Malawian farmers, and what it actually found is that once you cost that family labor at minimum wage, most of them are earning below the poverty line, and the independent farmers are running at a loss. So the leaf is cheap partly because a lot of the work behind it isn't paid for, which is worth sitting with, whatever you think about the quality. So one would assume more attention goes into that leaf than these massive farms producing tons of tobacco at once. Like it's a family and they know it's going to go to auction. So one could argue that makes it even better quality, but to say African grown is known to be worse quality, I think is unfair and unfounded. And then I think someone else on the forum had said that you're just tasting the sauce, and perhaps. But Gawith Hoggarth produced really excellent blends, and their unflavored blends will likely have tobacco coming from these same countries. So in that case, you would not be tasting just the sauce. In the first third, you're getting a lot of Latakia, but it's still chocolate. Supporting it is the Burley, I think, with the nuttiness, and the Virginia carries a lot of the flavor with it. It holds it together as a binder. Almost as a filler, but I don't want to say filler or binder because people think I'm talking about cigars or cigarettes. The chocolate does survive the light, and the chocolate is still present. The mustiness of the Latakia, you can taste it on every puff, but it's also kind of there in the retrohale. The Burley, the nuttiness, I think, is retrohale, and the fruitiness you might associate with the Virginia is maybe rounded out by the vanilla, so it's hard to discern. You can't necessarily say, oh, this note I'm getting is vanilla, but you can tell it's rounding out. It's the same way you'd use vanilla in a recipe that requires chocolate. If you're making a chocolate cake, there's going to be chocolate and vanilla rounded out to remove some of the bitterness of the cocoa. It contains both cocoa and chocolate, like a cocoa casing and chocolate topping, but I cannot tell the difference between the two. In the middle third, it's kind of nutty and still very chocolatey. The Latakia is present in the smoke, and it's also a retrohale artifact, but there's no bite. Zero bite at all. The moisture, it's a little bit moist, but I smoked it straight out of the tin as you saw. My wife said this smells sweet, but different. And at the bottom, I think it burns cleaner than one would expect. It's really nice. Even if you don't like Lakelands, I'd say try this. The Lakeland is not what you're getting from it. The Lakeland is an afterthought. It's not Lakeland forward at all. And then would I cellar this? I'm not sure the topping would even let me taste the differences in flavor after cellaring it. The chocolate is there. You get the chocolate. Would I even taste the changes in the Virginia or the other components given the topping? I mean, that would be my concern. But it's a great blend. It just might not noticeably improve for my palate. Is it worth the price? Yes. And it sells currently in bulk. You can get this online. I got this tin in Roanoke, Virginia. I drove a sickening amount across different tobacconists to find it, but I'd say it's worth the price. If you can find it, definitely get it. And there's clearly a lot of people who want it, which is why it's usually sold out. I don't know if I can compare this against Ennerdale because Ennerdale is such an in-your-face Lakeland and this is not. Would I compare genres across the two? Probably. If I'm in a chocolate mood, I'd go for this, and if I'm in a perfumey floral mood, I'd go for the Ennerdale. What I can compare this to is Two Friends English Chocolate, which I might do a Jar Wars on if people are interested. I've attached the flavor notes from puffin.reviews. I also showed the similar blends that are recommended. In this case, it's Two Friends English Chocolate, probably because it's an English chocolate, and GLP's Chelsea Morning, probably because it's a more mild English blend. Or maybe LJ Paretti's Dutch Chocolate, which doesn't have Latakia. I could probably add some and see if there's any similarities. So back to the topic of foreign grown tobacco. Americans import a lot of tobacco from China and other places. The difference is we mostly put it in cigarettes. It doesn't appear in pipe tobacco. So why don't we use it in pipe tobacco? If we know it has a higher sugar content, or if people are chasing blends with nicotine, then why don't we use more Brazilian, for example? I don't really have an answer, but if you have one, I want it. Thank you to everyone who subscribed after the last video. The Ennerdale video got further than I expected it to. If you missed the background on Lakeland essences and the history behind them, check out my previous video. Sources are all linked below, including the paper. I'll finish up this poll and then there will be another one up soon. If there's something you want reviews, just put it in the comments. Please consider donating to the Strickland Gatehouse Trust. Link is in my latest post and in the description.